Well, hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to present Dion McCormick, no relation, who is our lead solutions engineer. We're also here today to take your questions, so please enter those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So let's get started. Hello, Dion, are you there?
Yes, I am. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, but I forgot to mention Sarah, which is terrible of me. Sarah
Of
Mitchell is
course.
also joining us today, and she'll be doing most of the work in the background, looking up documentation articles and helping folks out as well and answering questions. So welcome, Sarah, as well. I'm sorry to have left you out in the intro. So,
That's
Dion, I'm
fine.
going to go ahead and make you the presenter,
Great.
and I'll let you know when I can see your screen. And there it is.
Dynamite. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And we have a fun little presentation. We're going to start a new series today, and I think you'll find it very valuable, interesting, and I love it. I'm having fun with it. But before we go into that, we're always here for your questions. So take the time to go to your questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel, enter in the questions that you have, and Dave and Sarah will be monitoring those very closely, and we'll try to get to as many of those as possible in our presentation today. And also, as I go through and do the presentation, take your time to ask questions and get clarifications if I cover something a little too quick or have a question, and we'll do our best to make sure we answer all of those questions. And as we've mentioned before, you can always send email to guides@alphasoftware.com, GUIDES at alphasoftware.com. That helps drive our essentially our content and gives us a little time to get prepped and stuff. We've got a few that we're working on with people, and we do whatever we can to try and help and answer those questions and get that out to people. So this week, what I want to do is start a new series. And first, just kind of, we haven't talked about this in a couple weeks, but this was presented at the last developers convention. And there are 4 prime areas that Alpha really focuses on. One is the client side experience, really the UX builder. And that's one thing I'm going to show you a little bit more today of some new features and capabilities. And those, a lot more are actually in the works. So a lot of that is going to be coming out very soon. Very neat stuff, very exciting stuff, and it's really going to make it easier, faster, and make your apps even better. It's going to be really fun. But also along with that is a integrated level of server-side functionality to make that front end work great. Also improving our Alpha Cloud environment. A lot of neat things in development there. Transform just leaps and bounds. We have a dedicated weekly webinar that you can join us, Transform Tuesdays. And it is amazing, all the new capabilities and features, including some stuff we've just been putting to really make it easy to integrate Transform with other systems. So today I'm going to focus a bit, I'm going to go back and focus on the UX Builder and some new capabilities there. And to do so, I want to talk a little about user interface, because the UX Builder is really about building user experiences. That's again why it's called UX, for user experience, and it allows you to create very powerful experiences for both web and mobile. And it's really grown and developed over time, and over time we've also seen it mature in terms of the complexity of things you can do within the tool sets. And that's one of the things I'm going to talk about today. So what I want to talk about today is grid data editing. It's really a critical aspect of any application, and has been a part of Alpha forever, really forever, based on the desktop all the way out from there. The idea is that you're presenting data in a grid format and being able to modify, edit, update, insert, etc. that information. Now, up to a few years ago, it was the grid component. And the grid component was your primary tool for being able to do it. And the grid component was very mature. I still use it today. It's still supported and used, and you can continue to use it. So we're not saying don't use the grid component. But in the advent of the more mobile world, there was a transition. So the grid component was very mature, could do a lot of really capabilities, had built-in operations to interface with different types of data and do updates, etc. But with the advent of the mobile platform, we realized that the grid component had certain inherent limitations. One of the primary limitations is that it wasn't really truly responsive. It was built for a desktop metaphor. And so therefore, when you tried to translate into using it with a mobile platform such as a tablet or a phone, it worked, but it just wasn't conducive for those environments. So Alpha came up with the list control. And the list control is very powerful and actually has a lot more capabilities in the under the covers than the grid control, specifically around the ability to allow it to be used for mobile interfaces, to have dynamic interfaces. You know, in our last series, we talked about how you could actually take a list control and turn it into a Kanban representation. But one key thing that kept people going back to the grid was the ability to build a grid where you could literally edit the data right in the grid. So you didn't have to have a separate grid and then a detail view scenario. And for a long time, that was the basic premise of the list, was that you had a grid, or sort of a viewing front only, or a view front end that was view only, and then on the back end you had the ability to edit the data. Now the grid was, or I'm sorry, the list control was still managing that process, but it didn't have the same experience that you did with the grid. And a lot of people really like that. It's just simple and easy. You can see here's an example of it here. It's a little dated user interface or style per se, but you could sit there and immediately edit data and people really enjoy it. It's more of a spreadsheet metaphor kind of scenario. So the cool thing is now the list has what's called inline editing. And I'm going to show a quick demonstration and introduce it today, but over the next few weeks, we're going to dive into it and spend more time on it. So similar to what we had before, and let me go back one, you have the ability to actually edit the data right there as it's presented by the list. And this is very flexible. And what's really cool you're going to find about it, works super good on mobile platforms. It's really neat. The new technology, new techniques that are used under the covers are very mobile, say, friendly, and take advantage of all that there. So list inline editing is very cool. So now you can use a list to inline the edit. It brings that grid functionality to the list control. So the grid has had all this capability since it's such a mature technology, but now we're bringing, essentially, this is the last, I think, key building block difference between what the list could do versus the grid. And so now we've kind of crossed that. And that was always part of the objective, was to basically allow you to do all of the things you wanted to do with a grid with a list control and more. Now, that said, you have far more control over your quote unquote editable grid. Since it is a mobile centric and we're using the list control, you have an enormous amount of power over the representation of data, how it's styled, how it's formatted. The grid, there's a lot of ways you could kind of fudge it, but the reality is it sort of had a certain style, a certain way of doing things. And that was essentially the way it worked. And that was beneficial because it did that and it did it really, really well. But the downside of it is that you really can control, say, the styling and how people interface with it. The neat thing is the list inline editing combines the best of both worlds, the ease of being able to edit data right in the list, but the power of being able to create the way that happens in many different ways that can be essentially tuned to your particular scenario or requirements. Super important, mobile ready. This is a big, big difference between the grid. First and foremost, the list is a responsive control, therefore it will lay itself out nicely on mobile kind of configurations. And super duper duper important, the list also has the built-in offline data editing and management. So you can basically bring that data offline and be able to edit that information offline and then sync it up later, which the grid did not have. The grid was a online connected environment. If you didn't have a connection to the server, game over. So that really is a huge differentiator and a real important reason to use this technology. And the other really fun thing is that the list power behind the scenes, meaning not only the mobile capability, but all the things we're exploring with the list in terms of Kanban and styling and multiple layouts and all these other powerful list functional capabilities you get to bring to bear on essentially a grid-like interface. So that's a bit of background. So what I would like to jump in is kind of go explore this and show you and introduce it. And again, we're going to unwrap it in more details there. As I go through this, please take the time to go to your GoToWebinar control panel in the questions section and ask questions. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my Parallels desktop here, and I'd like to go ahead and go into my demonstration. So with that, first what I'd like to do is let's talk a little bit about the grid. I just want to like set the, I know a lot of people are familiar with it, but I just want to make sure that we're very clear on this. So I've created a grid component. I'm going to connect it to my data source. In this case, I'm going to make it a customer. So I'm connecting it to a backend data source, customers. Then I'm going to go to my fields here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say editable. And I'm going to go here and just drop some fields in here. And I'm going to go ahead and save this as customer_grid. So very quickly, I was able to connect to my backend data source. I was able to define my fields, and I was able to say make it editable. And what's nice is Alpha automatically knows how to take care of all this stuff for me. So it does a lot of the work for me. So now you'll see that I have my grid here. Notice I'm using one of the more modern user interfaces. I can go right in here, edit that data. I've got the save button right there, and boom, it's edited and saved that data. So I didn't have to write any code. I didn't have to do anything. And see, so you can see within a matter of a few moments, you can have a full-blown interface into your database information. And then you can take it from here. You can add drop-down boxes. You can change the field types. You can do, the sky's the limit. It's pretty impressive. But the neat thing, and I always liked about grids, was how quickly you could put together this kind of interface. And more importantly, the fact that you could have this spreadsheet metaphor, meaning right there, I can sit there and edit it, and I didn't have to create a detail form. I didn't have to pop anything up. If I wanted to, I could do that, but I could do that very simply within it by just saying, hey, this is an editable grid, and I'm going to use text boxes to go around these items here. So that's a quick refresher. And again, grids are really powerful. We're not saying don't use them. Absolutely. If it's easy, simple, use it. But the one thing you're going to find is that if you have a mobile situation or an offline situation, or want to use some of the more newer styling capabilities, you're going to be limited. It's sort of it's what's in the box, and that's in the box there. So let's go ahead and contrast that and use the new list inline editing capability. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go here and I'm going to create a new UX component. So remember, we're using a UX component with a list built into it. So I'm opening up a UX, which is our form component. For people who are newer, it's basically our form component here. So I'm going to go to controls, and I always like to kind of put a panel card on there for styling purposes with a header, just so it's, makes it look a little nicer, and it makes it also easy to lay things out. So I'll go here and I'm just going to put in some static text, and I'll go in list inline editing example. And so this is purely just formatting, nothing there. But again, what's nice is since we're using panel cards and other things, we can make it mobile and other pieces there. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Okay, so I've got it saved. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to add our list. Now, a list is a data control. So you'll see on the left-hand side, I have my different categories of the type of things I can add to my presentation here. You'll notice that under data controls, we have list. And that's because list connects to backend data. So you see all these elements here, things like text boxes, text areas, drop boxes. You can connect them to backend data sources, and the list is no different. So I'm going to click list, and I'll go list customers. I'm going to click OK there. Now I could use the quick setup genie, but I'm going to go through and do it step by step so we can see that. And I'm going to go ahead, now that I have this list of customers, since I've used a panel card here, and in a sense, why I use panel cards, I can say fill container, and what will happen is this list of customers will expand to hold or to consume all of the space. So it's responsive in nature. It will, based on the size of the screen, it will do that. And I'll show you a little bit more about that in a little bit. So now I have my list control here, but there's nothing in it. It's kind of just an empty shell that is ready for me to do my work. So I'm going to go into my list of customers, and you'll see we have a similar but more powerful interface. So first out of the bat, we have all these different ways to load the data into my list. SQL databases, we could load it with data series, JavaScript functions, we could connect it right to Transform, and Excel and CSV, excuse me. And so I'm going to do SQL. So very similar to what we were doing with the grid. I'm going to select that. So we're pointing to the same data source. I'm going to select my customers database. So I'm just kind of walking through the same process. I'm going to go to my field list here, and I'm going to go ahead and select my fields. And I'm not going to set any filters or orders. You could do that if you want, but I am going to go down here. And what I want to do is, it's already decided that the primary key is customer ID, but I'm going to go ahead and set the return value type is primary key. So because I'm going to be doing editing in this, you want to define your list to use the primary key so it knows how to build the commands to talk to the back end. Now, all Alpha is doing is generating these SQL statements much like it did under the grid. Very similar concept. And so it's a nice transition. If you've been doing grid stuff, going here is really, really simple. So now let me go to my list layout, and we're going to be using a columnar layout, much like a grid to start out with, and I'm going to go here. So I've set up my data source, pointed at the same location. Here are my different fields here and my list layout. I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to click Save. And first, this is non-editable, but we're just going to go ahead and show what it looks like here. So you can see, very similar to what I did with my grid, but in this case, you're seeing they are static sort of text that's available here. And this has the ability to scroll up and down. It responds nicely on mobile platforms to swipe gestures, etc. It is responsive in nature. So let me go ahead and I'm going to kick this into my browser just to show you so you see what it looks like. Go ahead and do that. And actually, you know what? I'll also do the same thing for the grid so you can kind of look at the difference between them. I'm going to go to my grid here. And I'm going to go ahead and launch that also into the browser because that's one of the primary differences. So you'll see we have our UX, and I can shrink this down, and you'll notice that it's responsive in nature. So, you know, it's kind of expanding and contracting stuff. You'll see the grid is a little less flexible. You'll notice here that it's cut off part of my grid. So if I've got enough space, it looks great. But if I go here, you'll see it's kind of cut it off. With here, it's tried to kind of, you know, set it to a more sort of user-friendly interface, so you don't lose all that cutoff. And you have a lot of control in the list control. We're not going to go through now, but you have a lot of control over if the screen's a certain size, you can actually set up different layouts so you can use more of a mobile interface than say what would be considered a grid kind of structure here. So you can immediately see that if you're going to be deploying out, this gives you a lot more flexibility here. But again, we still have the ability here to go in and go do nice things like do my editing here and those. So let's go ahead and reapproach here and show how we do that there. So I'm going to go back into my list here, and I'm going to go to here, and I'm going to do a couple things that I need to do. I need to tell the list a little bit. I have to kind of instruct it to do a certain couple things. So the first thing I need to do is I need to go here to list properties, and there's a new feature. And again, this is pre-release still. We're not production yet, but very soon. But you'll see that there's a new area here called Allow In-Place Editing. And I will click there. So this allows you to turn on and off inline editing. So if you don't want it for your particular list, you don't have to have it. But that's a magic new button that's in there that allows it. Now, once we've done that, we have a set of settings that allow you to control how that works. So I'm going to turn it off and turn it back on, and I'm going to go in here. So you can see that now we have a whole set of things. First and foremost, a series of icons that allow you to set what the kind of basic functionality. When we did our grid, it automatically included those icons. This will do the same thing, but you can change them. You don't have to use our built-in ones. You can use your own SVG there. The other thing it has is the editing mode, and I'm going to come back and talk about that in a moment, but we have on row one row at a time, on row at a time, one row at a time. Now, super important too is there is a complete sort of event model around this that allow you to do some cool things, like before you start editing, when you save the edit, etc., that you can trigger that makes things, you can do a lot of really fancy things with that. So let's go ahead and just take a look at that. So I've gone ahead and said in-place editing settings, and I've set those. So I'm going to click OK. And you'll notice that it says, oh, in-place editing is turned on. The capture focus property must be set to false. And that's just there's a potential conflict between how the different modes work. So it's going to go ahead and set that for me automatically. I don't have to actually go in and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to go in my working preview, and I'll show you something pretty cool. So I'm right here. You'll see I've got there. Now what I'm going to do is double click on this field and check it out. It automatically turned this row from labels to a edit box or text edit capabilities. So if I go to a different row and double click there, you'll notice it sort of moved out of that. So it basically allows you on the fly to be able to turn this into an editable row. And so I can go here and click there and click there. Now, got to do a couple other steps. I've changed that. Let's go back in here and see what's up. And you'll see, wait a minute here. That's not editing. That's in place sort of editing, because we haven't enabled a couple other things. So I'll show you that in a few moments here. So, or unless you want to wait till next week, and I can wait till next week to show you how that works. It's really up to you guys. But anyway, so basically that first essentially checkbox just enables this functionality of being able to turn things from a static text into a editable text. But the other parts of it, the actual editing, is got to do a couple other things. So let's go ahead and do that here. So first and foremost, I'm going to go back to my design. I'm going to go into my list of customers here. And one thing I want to do here is, you notice the method I used to edit it was to double click on the row. And that may be counterintuitive. People may not understand, oh, this data is editable. So you'll notice that since I have enabled this in-place editing settings here, I'll go to list layout, and you'll notice that over on the left-hand side, we have a new in-place editing icons little holder. So I can go over here and add that to my list. So I'm going to click OK. Go ahead and save this, go into working preview. And now you'll notice that it added that column, and there's some new defaulted icons. And again, these icons can be changed. Everything can be styled in it because it's a list control. So if I want to edit this, I can click the little edit button and I go into that mode. Now, you'll notice when I went into that mode, you have two things here. You have a checkbox and an X. So if I modify that and click checkbox, that's essentially closing the row. But if I go in here and I say, oh, you know what, I don't want to edit that, I can click the X button and it does there. And you can trap all those activities, so it gives you a lot of functionality on how to do it. So if you can either double click on it, or you can instruct it to give this little row. And again, that's to make it much easier for the person to understand that, oh, this data is editable, and that's where I see it. And that's very similar to what you saw where in the grid, it automatically added those elements there. So now we have the ability to essentially enable an edit row, but you'll notice we're still not saving the data. What's going on is that I'm modifying the data, but it's really not persisting that information. It's coming back to my 1, 2, 3 here. So we need to do two things. So let's dive back in and do that. So the first thing we need to do is go into the list of customers. And I'm going to the list properties. And the first thing we need to do is enable has detail view. So you'll notice I have 4 tabs up here: data source, fields, list properties, list layout. I'm going to go ahead and enable has detail view, and you'll notice, there's a new detail view that's enabled here. And if you've done any work there, you can have a detail view, you can tie it to other controls, etc. And there's a lot of capability in here where you can trap synchronization, events, etc. But basically, by enabling the detail view, it turns on all of that data management to be able to call and persist the data back to a backend database. When we did the data source, we told it, okay, go to the data source and pull the information in. So it was kind of a one-way feed. When we turn on data view or detail view, what it does at that time is that it will automatically enable all the functionality to manage that. So now we have the ability to persist that data to the back end. But we have one other thing we need to do, and that is to add our save and synchronize, or basically our save and synchronize capabilities here. So we need to be able to tell it to go ahead and synchronize that data to the back end data source. So I could go ahead and handcraft some buttons, but there's a really nice little trick. I'm going to go down here to define controls, and I'm going to scroll down till I get to list detail view buttons. And I'm sorry that went a little fast, but on the list, it's list detail view buttons. So the list detail view has all these abilities, doing undos, new record, delete record, etc., all built into it. And you'll see this is my list that's on there. So I want to save and I want to synchronize. So I'm going to add those two buttons in there. And the cool thing about that, and I'll show you in a moment, it writes all the code for me. So I don't actually have to create that. So I'm going to click OK. And you'll notice I've gone ahead and put all of these up in the header portion because I want them to be at the top of the screen and easy to see. So now, again, to enable editing, the first thing we did was went to list properties and said has detail view. And then after we did that, we added these buttons here. So let's go ahead and click save. And we'll do a little test here. So you'll see I've got my row up here. I've got my buttons. They're currently disabled because they're not in mode. I'm going to go ahead and change this right here. Going to modify that. When I click this, you'll know that it's actually done the save event. So I actually, to be honest, I don't need this button. But you'll notice over here in the right-hand corner, I've got a little orange caret. That means that I have edited this data locally, but it has not been persisted to the back-end server. And that's important because that is the whole magic of the detail view of the list control, is it manages all that for you. So now when I'm ready to go, I click synchronize. And in a moment, the synchronize button will go back to disabled. The little caret's gone away. And if I come back and reload it, check this out. You'll notice that it actually persisted to the backend database, my modification to the contact name. And that's it, guys. That's all you need to do. It's going to take it. And you can trap things like if you want it to auto synchronize, you can set up all that stuff. Let me show you real quick. All of the power of the list control is in this bad boy. I can go to detail view. I can go here to synchronization policy. And I can say, go ahead and do all of my synchronization for me. So I'll go back in here, click save, do a working preview. I'll go ahead and edit this one more time, put in 1, 2, 3, click save. And notice what happens is after I save it, oh, it didn't do a sync. I'll have to check on that. Maybe that's an inline editing. I'll have to check on that. I thought it would do that automatically. But what you can do is you can capture that event and trigger this synchronize button. So I think that's when you have a separate detail view. So I'll check on that for our next meeting. But you can automatically, the idea is what I want to be able to do is I don't want to have them go through and take 2 steps. When they save this, I just want it persisted back to the back end automatically. So I can set that there. Now, I want to cover one other thing this week, then we'll go into a lot more detail. I'm just scratching the surface on these capabilities. But as you can see, all the hard work is done for me. I didn't have to create a detail view. I didn't have to create controls to edit the actual data. But I have full control, and we'll come back and talk about it. These can be drop downs, date fields, you name it. You can have any kind of experience you want for these kind of things. So like for city, when I click on it, instead of just being able to edit it, I can actually have that as a drop down. We're going to cover that in our next one here. But I can also create new records. So if I click add new record here, it's going to open up a blank record for me. And then I can do that and enter it there. I won't because I don't have my database set correctly. It's going to yell at me, but you can do that. So I say, no, I don't want that after all. But it's very intuitive in terms of how this works. It just boom, and it does work. So the cool thing about that is that's very similar to your experience with grids, is that it does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. You don't have to worry about that. Now, I do want to show you one real cool feature about the list control and inline editing, and this is super duper cool. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And you'll notice we've been using a grid metaphor, which works great for, desktops and tablets and things like that, all working great. But the reality is I may not always have the opportunity to be on a desktop. Maybe I'm on a mobile. So let's say I'm in this scenario. I'm going to go ahead and enable mobile, and I'm going to do a working preview. And you're going to see it's going to do its best job. But the reality is we don't really translate into a mobile interface. Now, the reality is if I click on here, all of the regular behaviors work exactly the same, but it's just not a good layout for that. So let's do the following. I'm going to go into a list of customers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go down. Because I don't want to lose the work I have. And by the way, this is another really awesome feature of the list control is, you know what? I want to go down here and I'm going to go here to the list properties, and I want to say I have multiple layouts. And what I want to do is, so now I have multiple layouts. And what that means is I'm not limited to a single layout. So you'll notice when I did that, I have a new tab up here called multiple layouts. And you'll see my previous layout, which was my columnar one, is called default. And so if I go over here and look at the list layout, that's where it is there. But now I can click add, and I'm going to call this mobile. And in fact, that could be like phone or there. And I get to choose, guess what, Kanban's still in there, which one I want. So I'll click freeform. So now I have two different layouts. So now when I select mobile here, I go over to list layout, and I go here down and left, I click mobile, and this is my mobile interface. So I'm going to go ahead and do customer ID, and I'm just going to, I could use one of the pre-built, remember we have predefined templates that are now available, and a lot more are coming in the near future. It's going to be very fun on that. A lot more that are geared towards this, but I'm just going to do it manual. I'm going to go BR, and I'm going to put in company name and contact name and, typing capabilities. And you know what? Let me go ahead and put in a HR. So yeah, let's see if what that looks like. And in fact, I can do a preview right here and kind of see what it looks like. Takes a moment. Oh, the preview must be on the other one. So I'll click OK. So I've got my multiple layouts now. I've got my default one in my mobile here. My default one looks like a grid and the other one's a mobile, and they both live in the same list. Now I'm going to go back to my multiple layouts here, and what I want to do is I want to say, let's see, where do I set that? You'll notice here that when I'm here, it says it's like default, but which is the default layout, meaning that when this loads up, unless you've given it directions, which one should it show? So currently it's the grid one. I'm going to go ahead and click mobile, and I'm going to say default. So now this will force this one to load up. So now I click save. I go into my working preview, and we're in a mobile metaphor. So there you go. Now again, it's not pretty, but check this out. Now I have my there, and it obeys all this swiping. And again, this is just CSS and HTML, but watch this. So I'll go here to Marie Anders again. I'm going to double click on it. Check it out. It goes into inline list editing mode. And I can do that. And I can save it by going out. And then I can click synchronize, and it synchronized that data automatically for me. And I can add icons and things like that to turn into that mode. I can apply styling. So as you can see, try doing that in this, on a mobile platform. It's just not built for it. I love this control. I use it a lot, but it's not built for it. And the cool thing is you can actually build into it. There's a cool function in here. If I go back into my list of customers, and if I go to my list properties, and I go down to multiple layouts here, I can auto select layout on orient change, where it'll actually, depending on if I'm portrait or landscape, it'll do that. And there's lots of other ways for you to trigger which layout to use. So the beauty of it is now you can create one system that's going to work great on both a mobile and a desktop and a tablet you name it, it's available from there. But what's really important and why I wanted to kind of put it in here was the fact that when you're using this, the built-in inline editing works both great on like a horizontal function, but in terms of how you do this here, it's all built into it. You can adjust, you have the control over adjusting this. So now I can click synchronize and all of that, this is all offline. The other thing that's really cool, and this was, I've been working with a couple associates that are doing it. The neatest thing about this too is when you're on a mobile platform, there's a huge amount of hardware acceleration. So you actually have a better experience on the mobile phone where you tap it and it turns it into an editable form. And it just seems intuitive. It seems natural. It's like you don't have to click here and then go to another form and edit it. You just double tap on it or you hit an icon, it turns it into edit mode, and then you click close and it saves it and you're done. The user experience is light years ahead of doing sort of a parent-child detail view and everything else. Now, you can use both metaphors, you can use whatever you want, but this opens up a whole new range of capabilities. And we're going to explore this in more detail. We're going to talk about the other form types, some more styling things that you can do, a little bit more about the event model. It's just really cool. Again, this is pre-release, but it's been worked on for the last couple months. It's really, a lot of people are using it because it's so attractive. And we encourage you, if you would be interested, download the pre-release. Definitely don't use it for production, but go ahead and experiment with it. You'll find that it's very stable now. It's really, I kind of waited for a little bit to make sure it's super stable, but you can do that from there. But I love it. I really enjoy using it. It's a lot of fun. It unlocks the ability to do things that I could do with the grid now in the list. And on top of that, I have all the cool capabilities that are involved with the list control. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and break here, hand it back to my esteemed colleagues, and see if we have any questions and or comments, or they can correct me on what I did wrong.
Well, I'm not going to correct you. I think Sarah might, though. The columns, so we do have some questions, and the first one has to do with columns. Can the columns be resized by the user?
Yes.
Okay.
Alpha has built in, so let me go back to my multiple layouts. I'm going to go to my default, make that the default layout. And that's another thing, cool. I can just pop back and forth. I don't have to go create a whole nother list control. I mean, it's really fun how to do that. Where is that? Where is that? I know we have the ability. Let me go ahead and search here, resize. I know we have the ability to do that. Sarah might be able to point me to that. We have a couple cool things that are built into it. Actually, let me go ahead and, I'm going to try this. Okay, I could break something here, but I'm going to give it a try.
All right.
There's a cool feature built into here, and let me see if I have it on this one, called the list selector. And I'm going to go ahead and add that control here. And we could do a whole session on this one, but I'm going to go ahead and add that control here. So now I'm going to go into working preview. And this one is just fairly new, but really powerful. Oh, you know what? Let's go to a desktop metaphor. Okay, so I've got, so one thing that's really cool is I can add a little selector here that will automatically change my, so you can give the person like 3 or 4 different views and they can actually just say, oh, I want this one here. Now the ability to resize it, I wonder if that's this one, or is that in a, let's see, let's try this here. Is that the one? I was just starting to play with this one too. The ability to select which columns, maybe you can point that direction. Let's go in here. No, this is a new capability. Where is that? List selector. Is it list menu? The answer is yes. I'm so sorry for not even just saying it. No, that's the list menu capability. That's a hole there. There's ability and oh, here it is. List column show hide. There it is. I knew it was in here. So I'm going to add that. I'm going to break this because I put it in the wrong location. So I'll go put this up move it down here. Explode list. I have to explore that. That sounds fun. That should be on every one of my demos. Explode something, like this week's topic. Okay, so it's a button called Show Hide List Column. So I'll go ahead and do this. So I do like the list selector because you could have different views and allow them to do that, and that could be like Kanban versus the other. It does all that for you, switch between them. Okay, so this is so cool. Notice what columns I have here. Alf key, company name there. And you go, you know what? I really only want to focus on these three here. So by adding this little control here, I can sit there and say, for instance, I don't want the title, address, city, there. So notice what happened. It hid those columns there. And so I can go back in here and re-add them in. Plus I can say, you know what, city, I want to be right here. And now city's here. And you can save that and it persists it. So when you reopen this grid on your machine, it puts it from there. Now I thought there was a method. I'll have to check. Might be a method. Maybe. Oh, wait. Hold on here. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to go back into list customers. Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to go to my layout. And as you have to check resizable column in the field for the field. Gotcha. Okay. So you go into the list layout, you select the field here, and you'll notice over here it says resizable column.
Got it.
So I'm going to go ahead and say
field by field.
name.
It's not the whole table.
It's on a per field basis.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like now I'll go back to a description field or something that was long, it would make sense to stretch it out, or like a date, which is always the same size, you'd leave alone. There we go.
So you'll notice
size markers. Yeah, size handles. Very cool.
Now notice this one I didn't enable, so it's kind of fixed. And also notice as I do this, it rearranges, it's responsive in nature. So it allows you to do that. And then this allows you to say, oh, you know what, I don't want to see address, city. Great. And also I would like the contact name to be first. So I'll go contact name and put it right here. There we go. And so there's a lot of flexibility. And again, try doing that on a grid in terms of showing and hiding and all that. You just don't have that ability. And all my functionality is still in here. So I can go ahead, go to Marie Anders, edit Marie Anders in this environment, and boom, and do a synchronize, and all that functionality is there. So great question. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sarah, for saving my bacon. And so that's our introduction. More questions that we might have?
There are more questions.
Good.
So another one, it has to do with, you showed how when you save, you automatically synchronized, which was cool. But is there a way to save just right on the row itself without having the buttons up there?
Oh, like on here having,
yeah, well, like as soon as you tap it, yeah.
Yeah, I believe what it is that if I go back into here and I go to the list properties,
yeah,
and go to the where is it? Where did I put that? Here it is. So I have a on edit save. In here, I can say I'm going to execute it. Going to create action JavaScript, and I'm going to say sync. And I'm going to go in here and say sync is going to be a list control action.
Yep.
I'm going to say, oh, you know what? Actually, it's not that. Let me, actually, the best way to do saves because of the way, and oh, that's why I think I added that field before. I think I wanted to do that. I forgot why I did that. But if I go here to the save button, here's that code.
Oh, okay.
So I can just copy that code. Yeah, by the way, a trick, just so I don't go too fast on this, if you kind of want to know a way to manipulate this, what you can do is go to the list detail view button, create the button, and then all the code you need is in each of these buttons. Oh, so you don't have to figure it out from all that. So I'll go into this save. I'll grab this. And then pre-release, let's wake up. There we go. So I'll go back into my list of customers. Now, what I probably want to do is make a JavaScript action that does this. So I'm going to do that anyway. I'm going to go to my list properties because I don't want to bury this stuff deeply in there. So I'll go to the on edit save. I'm going to go here and I'm going to still edit my and we'll add this new action called save. And I'll go ahead and go in here and I'll make it text mode and paste that stuff there. So now I've got that. I'm going to click to see how to invoke this, copy that, and I'm going to paste it here. So instead of actually embedding the JavaScript here, I want to put that on a central JavaScript action. So now what will happen is, and I could also, by the way, here's the reason why. You know what? I want to also synchronize that. So I want to do a save and synchronize it. So here's my thing. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to go to my JavaScript action, edit my save command, paste that. And now what I've done is I've created this action. I don't have to go reopen the list of customers to go edit that JavaScript. It's in one place. Now, let's go ahead and go into working preview. And we'll go ahead and try this here. Great question. So I'll go ahead and change this. So you'll notice, I'm going to go ahead and exit out. You'll notice that it restored the data and didn't fire anything. But now I can go back in there, change this. I'm going to click this button right here. And notice, synchronize.
Saved and synced. And I saw the little orange triangle at the top right appear and disappear just between that save and the
Yep. And so I think there's an issue on there where it was doing, let me try this real quick. It was updating this. I just want to do the sync on that because it's doing the save for me. I believe the save function is built into it. And I think what it was doing was like doing a real quick refresh. That's why I kept restoring there. So let's go ahead in there.
I see.
And hey, we're all learning together. Okay.
All right.
No, yeah, there's some, I'll check on that. There must be something with the timing of it saving it before that. Maybe I have to do it after it's applied the save to me. But that's how you can trap all of these behaviors to do many different things. And also built into the list is the after sync event. So you can basically say, after I've synced all the data on the server, go ahead and trigger a post process. So those kind of things there. Oh yeah, was it me? Yeah, I think I screwed up. Let me go in there. Maybe that's this. Let me go to the detail view. Sarah was saying that I went in here and on my synchronization policy, maybe that's conflicting, is that you don't want to do that. And that was mainly when you're using a detail view kind of scenario. So let's give that a try. And maybe this is it. Let's see there.
I think what you have to do is change your synchronization policy to do a synchronization when the list is saved.
Okay.
Synchronization policies right there. Yeah.
Yeah, I had it here when
Form client server.
Just let's do that one there.
Yeah.
I thought I had set that up earlier. We'll come back and address that, but I want to make sure there's no mysteries or anything like that. So temporarily, I'm going to go into my in place, go to the edit, and I'll go ahead and
just comment that up.
Comment that for now. Let's just see if by enabling that one thing, it should trigger that automatically. But if not, we'll get an answer for you. In place is kind of doing a bunch of stuff for you that normally you would handle with a detail view. So it's a little different animal, and that's kind of why we're covering this.
There you go.
It's still
right. Oh, it didn't synchronize.
Nope, didn't sync. So I'll get that addressed because you definitely want to have the ability after you edit something that when you close it, the user is not responsible for synchronizing that. You want it just to kind of go right to the back end. And of course, the neat thing about that is that if it can't synchronize it, it will just leave it in an unsynchronized sort of mode until you have a connection and can do that. So we'll follow up, get an answer on that, and get that done.
Excellent. Now I see that the fields here are editable, but someone pointed out something important. Customer ID is a key field, and they don't want you to be able to edit that key field. Is there a way that you could prevent them from doing that in the...
Yeah, and we'll be covering all those elements as we go through it, kind of deciding how, giving you the more fine-tuned control over how the editing is done.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Let's see what else we've got here. That looks about it. Oh, can you shorten the row height? Like if you want to stuff more lines together on the page.
Yeah, and I'll have to check this. I'm on a pre-release here, but in here, I'm going to put in the compact word And I was seeing it act a little weird. So let's see. Yeah, see, and this is because I'm on a pre-release. It's not obeying that inline. So if I take it back out, so let's go ahead and go in the style name and just say alpha blue. But that will, and then use compact theme. Let's try this and see what that looks like versus mine. I think there's something on my pre-release. I was trying to do that. Oh, there it is. Okay. That's exactly. I wonder why.
That colon syntax you were using is only for project properties, not individual.
Good point. So normally you would go here, go to project properties, and I'll go in here and I'll select blue and I'll say compact, comma pulse. That's our kind of standard compact pulse. And then when you're actually in here, I can go to the properties for the, oh, that's the grid. Let me go here. And I can say use project style. And so it'll pick up that. But as Sarah was saying, if I just click here, then I can say use compact theme and pulse by check marking these things here. Now, that said, back to the original question, you can now have a much more robust interface. So I can go in here and you have a higher level of density by a big margin. And everything else works the same, but you can see. And all of our features of being able to resize these things is all in there. All works fine. I can show and hide the columns, saying, okay, I want that. I want contact table there. I want my editing thing there, and then good to go. So all of it just works. Pretty neat stuff, including searching and sorting and things like that.
So a couple more questions. One has to do with a star control. Would you still be able to do something like a star control if you're using inline editing?
We'll be covering all those kind of elements.
Excellent.
Good
Stay
question.
tuned. Okay, I see. And then the last thing was that, well, actually two more things. One is doing just in general for lists. Do you have the ability to do column totals, for example?
Yes.
You can. Okay.
Yep.
So because that's
and the
a
way to do
feature
that
of
is you
Grid.
go in here
Mhm.
and you can go into your list control.
Yep.
And then I'm going to go, so I'm using, I'm going to my layout here. So again, I'm in this layout right here. So I'm going to go to list properties, and I believe it's called client side group breaks. So I've gone to the list properties here, and I'm saying it has client side group breaks.
Okay.
So I'm going to enable that. And now I'm going to enable that. I'm going to say add my group. So it's very similar to a grid. And now I can go in and define, sort definition is on which one here.
Let's do it like on state or something, because the last names are unique, but.
Yeah, let's go ahead and put in, what's my, did I have state in my list? Let me look at my list fields. I'll do it on city. Maybe city would be a good one there. So I'm going to go add a group. I'm going to put my sort definition on city. And then my group break is on data.city. And by the way, I can also insert a field name right here. Okay. And where do I have to do it? Let's see. Might want to come back and do a little more detail on that because yeah.
So star control, the ability to make a field read only. That's another one we want to get back to. And then also the styling so that so it looks more like a grid. So the person has used the grid and they liked how it kind of looked like a spreadsheet. In other words, each of the data looked like they were in cells. There was a box around it. In our default style for the list, it's just a line underneath each of those. So the question is, can you style it so it looks like a grid? Can you put the data in boxes?
Bingo. Okay, great point.
Yeah. So I'll get that one too.
Yeah, actually I get that a fair amount because people do want to have a spreadsheet metaphor.
Yeah.
It just is kind of intuitive. They're so used to using spreadsheets, they're looking for that. And a lot of other grid products out on the market tend to use that philosophy too.
Great.
Good points.
Let's see what else we have. Oh, so we don't do it, but it would be kind of cool to have a row expander parent-child feature, which is something that does exist currently in the grid, where, for example, I could drill down on, for example,
Oh
Thomas
yeah, the
Hardy
row
and
expander.
see all of his orders underneath indented in another one. That would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
So I'll put that in as a feature request if it's not there already, but I wouldn't be. But that is a cool feature in the grid.
Very cool feature.
Right,
Very
so
easy to
what else do we
implement
have
too.
here? Okay, so another question might be for next week as well is can you show the number of records that are in the list somewhere? Like, oh, there are 7 records here, and also can you let the user know what record they're on? Well, you're on record 5 of 15.
You do have the ability in the list control.
Mhm.
And it's on. You can do list pagination.
Mhm.
Where's our pagination? Oh, I think it's on here. So you can paginate the data and say like, so that allows you to paginate, which is actually a performance issue here, but you also have the ability to add like the grid capability of like having the navigator. Let's go ahead and put it, has a list navigator. So you can enable that. And this is where you can define that. Oh, it's for each, no, that's different. That's a navigator. You can create a very similar effect. Like, one of the nice things on a grid, and let me pop back over here, is that you have this down below where you can kind of see how many pages you have. You can jump between pages. And the grid has that same or the list control now has that same capability because people really wanted to do that kind of scenario. Add paginate, I thought it was in the properties. Yeah, we'll cover that next time because I do want to show that because that's really handy to be able to put those kind of things at the bottom and show you're on page 1 of 2, etc. I'll find out where that is. There is, let me go ahead and grab this. Hold on a second. I'm grabbing this here. Maybe we can save some time. For showing the number of records, Sarah has put in there that shows how to add that. So the number of records there. It's actually list page selector is what I'm looking at. List navigation buttons, I believe what it is. We'll come back. I want to do that right. I don't want to just kind of, but you have the ability to add that traditional navigation structure, which is very intuitive for people. They just get it.
Mm-hmm. Great. So lots of great questions this session. So
really engaged.
We have
I
our work cut
appreciate
out for us for next time.
it.
Speaking
and beyond
next
that,
time,
we're going to talk about other ways you can edit data. The inlet, there's a lot of work that's been gone into it, and it has a lot of flexibility, and will open up whole new ways of looking at how you interact with data with the list. It's really fun.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now, Dion and I are going to be in Dion's hometown of Austin, Texas next week for the Field Service Connect 2019 trade show, where we'll be walking around and talking to folks. But there is a chance we will not be doing the webinar next week, depending on schedule. But there's, I think, an even better chance that we will be broadcasting you live from Austin, Texas, both of us, next week, and we can go over these issues. But we will send you an email if it is canceled. We will send an email to the people who are registered.
Oh, Sarah gave me the hint before we break, real quick.
Oh, okay, yeah.
In the list, you go to the data source, you turn on pagination, and then for the method, there was fetch more, auto fetch more, and now navigation buttons.
Gotcha.
And when you do that,
Dun, dun.
and you can style these and do other things like that. Where is it?
Should
Oh,
it be
it's
at the
not
bottom?
there. Oh, I think I might have to actually insert it. Go ahead in there, go back in there. Thank goodness Sarah's here. I'd be lost. Okay,
That's for sure.
paginate. Oh, has navigation bar. I missed one step. So you enable paginate data, select navigation buttons, and then say nav bar, and then you can actually modify that if you want. And now that I've done that, it's going to paginate the data, and it's going to put at the bottom. Oh, where is it?
Is fill container getting in your way of that? Does that take up all the
No, it
space?
should be showing that all there. Well, we'll come back to that there.
We'll come back to it. Great.
Cool.
So one final question that I'm getting from lots of people. When will this be available for general release? When is it coming out? When's the next real update? And sort of hearing through the grapevine, it's coming out pretty soon, which I'm going to say would be within the next couple of weeks, but we still need a little bit of testing and debugging to happen right now on that. But I don't think it's going to be terribly long before this next one is out.
Now, this has been a particularly longer preset, but there were so many changes on performance and also a lot of this inline editing that we just wanted to bake it longer so that it's rock solid when it gets out to the world.
Yeah. But definitely get the pre-release and try it out and let us know what you think. And that's it. So, hey, we are definitely out of time. But Dion, thank you very much for presenting. Sarah, thanks here answering questions behind the scenes and getting the right answers. Thanks to everyone who showed up today, especially those who asked questions to keep our sessions lively. If you do have further questions, please send them to guides, GUIDES, at alphasoftware.com. Hope to catch you at the next Wednesday webinar. Take care. Have a great week. Bye-bye.